Jana Shalakaya Chakshormilitanjena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Vanshakaupatarubhyascha Vipa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Trise Namaha. Jai Shri Gurudev. So we're very happy to be here with our family members in Budapest, Hungary. And we've been going through Bhagavad Gita. Well, in the summer we started, so we're thinking to go back. And everyone has a copy, right? So we are starting chapter 3, Karma Yoga. So the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita is like setting the scene, setting the background, and then the second chapter is it's kind of like a summary of the whole of Bhagavad Gita. So Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, in his edition, he calls that chapter "Contents of the Gita Summarized." And Bhaktivinoda Thakur referred to it as like a sutra, like a concise, presentation of all the teachings of Gita. You can follow. maybe you should sit next to Kanupriya for some translation. Simultaneous Hungarian translation. And then now with chapter 3, then we're going in more deeply into the specific topics of Bhagavad Gita, and beginning with Karma Yoga. And I'll just preface by saying, Karma Yoga, it's such a wonderful teaching, because Karma Yoga, it's a very universal teaching. It's something that applies in the practice of bhakti, and also it's a teaching that anybody in the world, because there isn't any touch of faith in God yet. There isn't any touch in theism yet in the teachings of Karma Yoga. So even persons who, don't, even an atheist, they can appreciate the teachings of Karma Yoga. Anybody can appreciate the teachings. So the whole idea, like the whole Vedic system, the idea is to give everybody a chance to get on the ladder of spiritual life, right? This is the whole idea. The whole Vedic system is running on this idea. Give everybody a chance. It's not just, the PhD students or just the people who want to go live in a cave and meditate for the rest of their lives, but anybody, everywhere, in any time, place, circumstance, with any level of understanding, any level of faith, they can approach this. They can think, oh, this is relevant to me. This is helpful to me. Anyone will be able to appreciate the teachings of Karma Yoga. So it's a very helpful way to introduce people to spiritual topics. Before you go to like the more direct teachings of Krishna consciousness or bhakti, this is like a nice way to introduce people, to show them this is relevant to them, this is relevant to everyone. So we can so Karma Yoga, we can also, before we start, we can also say the full expression is nishkam karma. So the word kama is pretty well known. Kama means desire, lust. So nishkam means free from lust, no desire, no selfish desire. So nishkam karma means, in other words, selfless action. Like action that is based on a spirit of duty, not based on a spirit of selfishness. So, and the word yoga, of course, it means connection, right? So it means a way of connecting with divinity through selfless action. And anybody can appreciate this, non-selfishness. Anyone can appreciate that principle. And it's a very powerful principle, because although it's very, the concept is very simple, if you, of course, the practice is not so easy, but the concept is simple. And if somebody can practice that in their lives, no matter what their faith is, they will experience tangible results. Because acting in a spirit of selflessness, it has a purifying effect on our consciousness. When we begin to act on the basis of duty and not on the basis of selfishness, then our selfish desires, because they're not getting any food, they start to starve and die. We have our selfish impulses, our selfish desires, and normally we're feeding them. We're giving into them. But if we stop that process, then they start to fizzle up. It's like sometimes a child, right? Like sometimes a young child is having like a temper tantrum, and sometimes the parents, they won't give the child what they want, right? This is one way of disciplining the child, because they know that, because the child sometimes they become a little smart. Oh, if I cry, then my parents will give me whatever I want, right? And I've heard some children talking like that, like they're making some strategy how to manipulate their parents, right? If I cry, then my dad gives me whatever I want, right? So sometimes parents, as a way of disciplining their children, they don't give in, right, to everything they ask for. Sometimes they just ignore the child. You can cry as much as you want, but I'm not going to give you the ice cream right now. You can wait till after dinner, then you can have your ice cream. So I'm not going to listen to your crying right now, right? So then eventually the child learns, okay, this isn't helpful. I'm wasting my time, So in the same way, all of these like selfish impulses that we have, if we start to ignore them, then they dry up. They'll leave us alone. They'll leave us. And when they leave us, then our consciousness becomes more clear. And we begin to feel more tangibly that Atma, that lighter spiritual element within ourselves. Because like what we're looking for, we already have, right? The soul, Krishna, it's not that they're somewhere out in the atmosphere and we have to go out and find them, but they're actually here already in our hearts. It's living within us. So if like the covers start to be removed, then naturally we start to feel that higher presence within ourselves. So this is what is so wonderful about karma yoga. It's like a very accessible door to starting spiritual life, that anybody can enter into. Okay, well, without further ado, we can start. So maybe we can we'll chant the verses together, and maybe we can chant the first page, the first three. Oh yeah, we all have different editions. I have like 3 or 4 different editions. Let's chant the first 3 verses together. So we're starting with chapter 3, Karma Yoga, the Path of Action. Arjuna Uvacha Jayasi Chet Karmanaste Mata Buddhir Janardana Tat Kim Karmani Gore Mam Niyojayasi Keshava Vyami Neva Vakyena Buddhamohaya Shiva Me Tadekam Vada Nishchitya Yena Shreyoham Apnuyam. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Lokesmin Dvivida Nishta Pura Prokta Mayanaga Yana Yogena Sankyanam Karma Yogena Yoginam. Arjuna said, O Janardan, O Keshava, if you consider wisdom superior to action, why then do you urge me to engage in the violence of warfare? I am confused by your words. They appear to be ambiguous, sometimes supporting action and sometimes supporting wisdom. So please tell me which is the most beneficial path for me to take." The Supreme Lord replied, "O sinless one, I have described the two paths to be found in this world. The yoga of wisdom practiced by the realized, and the yoga of selfless action practiced by those active in this world. Both paths touch the beginnings of devotional practice, since the ladder to the plane of devotion is one, while the practice is twofold according to the stage attained." Okay, we'll read the next 3 verses, so 4 to 6. Na karmanam manadambam, naishkarmyam purushošnute, na cha sannyasana deva, siddham samadhi gacchati, na hi kaschit kshanam api, jatu tishtya karma krit, karyate hyavasha karma, sarva prakriti jirgunai, karmendriyani samyamya, yaste manasa smaran, indriyartan vimudatma, mityachara sa uchyate. Okay, so verse 4. One cannot attain freedom from action by refraining from action, nor can one attain fulfillment by renunciation alone. No one can refrain from activity for even a moment. Everyone is impelled to act by the modes of material nature. Thus, the person of impure consciousness should not disregard scripturally prescribed purificatory works. One who externally restrains his hands, legs, and other senses of action, but whose mind dwells on sense objects, is a fool. Know him to be a hypocrite. So let's see. Yeah, so gyan is referring to so gyan, it's translated here as wisdom or sometimes as knowledge, and it refers to these practices which involve withdrawing from the world, and cultivating higher spiritual knowledge. So the general idea there is that you're renouncing the world, right? And then karma yoga is about continuing with your daily activity, your normal worldly activities, but internally cultivating detachment from them, right? And so Krishna is saying here that actually just, renouncing things externally, this ultimately won't get you anywhere, because you can externally renounce worldly action, but internally, the desire remains there. So therefore, one has to learn how to be able to engage with the world while internally cultivating detachment. This is real renunciation. And so then Krishna elaborates on that in the following verses. And he also points out here that actually you can't avoid action anyway, because we're always being, we're always under the influence of the material modes of energy, goodness, passion, and ignorance, right? Sattva, Raja, Tama, these 3 energies, material energies, they're always stimulating us, right? So sometimes, they're making us very energetic, sometimes they're making us very lazy and sleepy, and sometimes very passionate or angry, or they want us to go out for a run or go to sleep or to eat. Like the modes of nature, they're all influencing us like this. So actually it's pretty much impossible to avoid worldly action anyway. So instead, learn how to internally become detached from this worldly activity, rather than focus on externally detaching. Okay. So that chapter 6, it was verse 6, we already read, right? One who's externally restraining their senses, but internally thinking about sense objects, this is hypocritical. And I would like to mention here that this verse, it should be understood in the right way. Because, a few devotees, like several devotees at different times, they've quoted this verse to me as an excuse to do whatever they want, Because they say, this is what I feel like doing. And Bhagavad Gita says, if I don't do what I'm feeling all the time, then I'm a hypocrite, So some people take this verse as a license, to do whatever they want. That's not the idea. That's not the point here. It doesn't mean that we're not meant to, practice some degree of sense control. Obviously this is within reason. We have to practice some degree of sense control. Otherwise, already the world is pretty chaotic, but it would be much more chaotic, much more, mad if everybody followed every impulse that came into their mind at every second, So, one has to apply common sense, in these things. And also sincerity, Everything must be understood with sincerity, Otherwise, we can make many different interpretations and applications of these teachings. Like what the Varnashram system is about. And the Varnashram system of India, we can also mention, is based on karma yoga, So it means that our desires are being, we're able to express our desires, but in a controlled way, in a regulated way. Like to just totally suppress your desires doesn't get you anywhere. So instead, express your desires, but in a controlled way, Like, you like to eat chocolate, so have one chocolate bar in the day, Or you like to have a boyfriend or girlfriend, then have one boyfriend or one have one wife or one husband, not that you'll have a different partner every day, like these desires, it's okay to express them, but it should be in a controlled and a regulated way, so the idea is that these desires can be peaceful, can be calmed down, so they're not distracting you from spiritual life. It has to be just the right balance, right? We shouldn't feed them too much, otherwise they take over. But at the same time, if we don't feed them enough, then they also take over in a way, because we'll just be thinking about it. Like if we artificially repress our desires completely, then we're always thinking, I want that, right? So it's that balance, like that, the middle path, And this is the idea behind the Varnashram system, this, social system of India. And this is also the idea in karma yoga. It's also relevant here. No, depending on the degree of realization, of course. Okay, so we'll chant verses 7, 8, 9, right? Yeah. Yastrindriyani manasa niyam yada bhaterjuna karmendriyai karma yogam asakta savishishyate niyatam kuru karmatvam karma jayo yakarmana shuriraya cha pichate na prasidyada karmanaha yagyartat karmano nyacha lokoyam karma bandhana tadartam karma kunteya Mukta Sangha Samachara. O Arjuna, superior is one who, though married, has stabilized his senses by the mind and engaged in the yoga of selfless action. So rather than someone who's artificially repressing their desires and making a show like they're very detached, better is someone who is engaging with the world, engaging their senses, but internally trying to do so in a regulated way, in a controlled way, and gradually stabilizing those senses, through the practice of selfless action. So perform your prescribed duties, since to be active is better than idleness. Inactive persons cannot even maintain their existence. By giving up fruitive action and performing your obligatory duties, your heart will be purified. Surpassing the plane of renunciation, you will attain pure devotion, transcendental to the mundane plane. Selfless duty performed as an offering to the Supreme Lord is called yajna, or sacrifice. O Arjuna, all action performed for any other purpose is the cause of bondage in this world of repeated birth and death. Therefore, remaining unattached to the fruits of action, perform all your duties in the spirit of such sacrifice. Such selfless action is the way to begin devotional practice, gradually realize the presence of the Lord, and ultimately attain pure devotion, transcendental to the modes of material nature, nirguna bhakti. So this is quite an elaborate translation, extended. Can you read is that the ISKCON one? Can you read the Swami Maharaj Prabhupada's translation there?
That 9?
For 9, yeah.
Az emberek végezze úgy munkáját, hogy this is Hungary.
Can you read it in English?
This is only Hungary.
Or
only Maheshwari has.
But it's the same.
but you can translate it into English, right? Oh. Okay, we'll read the Hungarian, and then maybe Kanupriya can translate it.
I don't know.
Oh, you have the same edition, huh?
Yes.
Okay.
Almost the same.
Okay. Okay, we'll read the Hungarian first.
Az ember végezze úgy munkáját, hogy az áldozat legyen Vishnunak, másképp tettei az anyagi lányhoz kötik. Ó Kunti fia, teljesítsd ezért előírt kötelességed az ő örömére, hogy mindig mentes maradsz a kötelékektől.
7? Excuse me.
9. Can you translate that into English?
Very different my Hungarian translation. Exactly. I don't know.
Okay, it's okay. I have here another one. This is a different edition. Without performing action, it's a little confusing though. This translation is a little confusing. So okay, well, other than, I mean, I can do a simple translation. So other than action that is made as yajna, everything that you do in this world is karma bandhana, means is binding you to karma, has a karmic reaction. So everything done in this world, except what is done as an offering to Vishnu, to Krishna, is binding in this world. And then, so, O son of Kunti, perform actions for that purpose, freed from attachment to the results. So this is mentioned here in the English translation. But so yajna, first of all, the word yajna, like we tend to think of the word yajna as meaning a fire sacrifice, right? That's normally how we use the word. But the word yagya actually has a much broader meaning. And it actually means something, that is offered as a sacrifice. So, like there's one phrase which Gurudev would quote from the scriptures, Yagyo Vai Vishnu. That yagya means something that is done for the sake of Vishnu. Something that is made as an offering to Vishnu. So it's a pretty heavy, and this is quite a famous line, this Yagyarta Karmano Nyacha Lokoyam. Sometimes you hear Srila Sridhar Maharaj and Srila Govinda Maharaj quoting this. It's quite famous. And it's quite a strong statement. It's a very strong statement. Everything you do is binding you in karma, except what is an offering to the Lord, So it's one of those, things that, gets you thinking, right? How many things do we do in our day, which is, that's binding us? Practically everything, pretty much everything. Because even what we do as an offering is polluted because we're in an impure condition, right? So it's quite a strong statement. The web of karma. A very tight, complex web, And ultimately, mercy is our only hope. Otherwise, we could never be freed from that. Okay, so we can go to 10, 11, and 12. Saha yagya praja shishtva purovacha prajapati anena prasavishyadvam eshavo stvishta kamaduk devan bhavayatanena te deva bhavayantu va paraspadam bhavayanta shreyapadam avapsyata ishtan bhogan hivo deva dasyante yagya bhavitaha te datanna pradayabhyo yo bhunkte stena evasa. In the beginning, Lord Brahma manifested the progeny of the world along with sacrifices. He instructed them thus: take shelter of this religious principle of sacrifice, prosper and flourish. May such sacrifice be the bestower of the things you desire. Propitiate the gods by sacrifices, and may they satisfy you by bestowing your desired fruits. In this way, through mutual nourishment, you will be the gainers of great auspiciousness. Propitiated by sacrifices, the gods, my worldly representatives, will bestow upon you all your desired, enjoyable things. But one who enjoys what is given by the gods without offering it to them is a thief. So this, this principle of sacrifice, it's kind of like like in a modern, in a modern humanistic world, it sounds a little outdated, right? Sacrifice, it sounds a little archaic, it's not such a relevant concept, right? In today's world, But the Vedic culture, the Vedic lifestyle, it's, this concept is very fundamental, because, and this is, we were mentioning this the other day in one of the Zoom meetings too, that this is one of the things that is actually very beautiful about the whole Vedic system. And I'm not talking about Krishna consciousness, I'm speaking about something more general here. But the whole Varnashram system, the whole Vedic way of life, it's based on this awareness, this recognition of all the natural cycles in the environment, right? like recognizing like for example, it's mentioned every living being has particular debts, right? When we're born, we have a debt to our parents. We have a debt to our ancestors. They've given us life. We have a debt to the devas, to the gods, because they're supplying, the rain, the winds, the earth, the water, food. All of these things are coming through the energy of the devas, of the gods. There's a debt to the sages, because the sages, the rishis, they've given spiritual knowledge. They've given the Veda, right? So then there's also a debt mentioned to humankind in general. So there's a recognition, like, we are not independent beings, right? We can't take one breath without, like on our own. Like there are so many forces in the environment which are allowing us to do everything that we do, So there's this consciousness, like there's a debt I have to pay. And so then there are different ways in which these debts are paid, So like by study of the scripture, you're paying your debt to the sages, By doing worship to the devas, then by offering worship to the devas, then you're paying the debt that you have to them, in everything that they're giving, supplying to you. By having children, you pay debt to your ancestors, because you perform rituals for your ancestors, and by having children, you are, continuing this cycle, so that your ancestors are always cared for, like something like this, So anyway, the point is, like, there's this awareness of everyone else in the environment, not just me, right? Not just, me, myself, and mine. I, me, and mine. But there's this awareness, like, I'm part of a system, right? And I want to live in reciprocation with others. And so therefore sacrifice is a part of that, making sacrifice in awareness of everything we've received and wanting to support others also. The principle of sacrifice, it's very fundamental here. So, so here Krishna is mentioning, this example, please the gods by offering sacrifices to them, and then they will give you everything that you need and that you want within this world, One who enjoys what is given by the gods without offering it to them is a thief, And like we were just reading the other day in Loving Search for the Lost Servant, and Srila Sridhar Maharaj is telling the story of Govardhan Leela, right? And he mentions how, like, the way the cowherd community lives is they live on dairy, right? They're dairy farmers. So they're raising cows who give them milk, and they sell that milk, and what they get from the milk is how they maintain themselves, right? So cows, how do cows live? They live on grass, right? How does grass come? By rainfall. Where does the rain come from? By the god, by the deva, Indra. So that's why the residents of Vrindavan, every year they hold this special sacrifice, right? So that they make offerings to Indra, and Indra gives the rain, and the rain feeds the grass, and the grass feeds the cows, and the cows make money for them, right? So it's like Krishna consciousness is a little different, because there's the focus on the center, right? But we can appreciate this. It's a beautiful way to live. It's a very harmonious and conscious way to live, that everything we get is coming by the energy of someone else or something else. So let me have consciousness of that. Let me honor that. Let me make some sacrifice for that, And and these are general teachings here. This isn't this isn't necessarily directly relevant to the teachings of Krishna consciousness. But this is something we can appreciate, and to some degree, we are applying in our lives. Okay, we'll read a little bit more. So, 13, 14, 15. Yagya shishta shinashanto muchyante sarvakil vishai punjate te tvagam papa ye pachantyatma karanat anad bhavanti bhutani parjanyadana samavaha yagyad bhavati parjanyo yagya karma samudbhavaha karma brahmodbhavam vidhi brahmakshara samudbhavam tasmad sarvagatam brahma nityam yagya pratishtitam. By accepting sacrificial remnants of the universal gods, virtuous persons are liberated from all sins arising from violence towards other living entities. So this is another point here, right? That the Vedas, they recognize consciousness everywhere, even in the vegetables, right? So we appreciate the vegan and the vegetarian movement and all these things, but they haven't actually addressed the root problem here. Yeah, okay, there's less violence. It's considered to be less violence because vegetables, fruits, they have a lower degree of consciousness, so they don't experience as much pain. Whereas animals, their consciousness is much closer to humans, so their consciousness is more evolved, so they experience pain, very strongly. So it's considered a much greater sin to kill an animal than it is to kill a vegetable. However, there's still some degree of violence. And there are even modern scientists, they've done research into this, and they show plants, they feel some type of apprehension when someone's going to cut them. Then they feel some apprehension. There's some response that they can detect within the plant life. There's some degree of consciousness. So there's still some violence there. So this is being pointed out here. The food that you eat, because it's becoming as a result of some level of violence, there's some pop. There's some sin there. So therefore, the only solution is to make that an offering, to offer that in sacrifice. And it's mentioning in the purport here, the remnants referred to here are not the same as the Krishna Prasad, food that has been offered to the Supreme Lord by his devotees. This is referring to something more general, offerings to the gods, to the general devas. But we can also apply this principle in Krishna Prasad, Guru Prasad, Vaishnav Prasad. But this is the idea that, and there's one place where Srila Sridhar Maharaj discusses this point, because in the prasadam prayers that we chant, what is that line? Prasada sevai sakala prapancha jai. That by offering service to prasad, to the Lord's remnant, sakala prapancha jai means we can cross over the whole of material existence. So Srila Sridhar Maharaj elaborates on this. It's in one of the books here, very beautifully, Sermons 3, and he explains that in this world, even if we're trying to reduce our degree of exploitation as much as we can, then we'll find that food is the one thing we can't get over. We could leave aside every other kind of exploitation, but we can't stop our need to eat, right? And actually it's mentioned in Kali Yuga that our life is dependent on food. We can't live without. In other ages, they could live without food. They could live just through the presence of their bones or the nervous system. But in Kali Yuga, we can't live without food. So we could cut every form of exploitation, but we couldn't leave the need for food. We could remove every other kind of karma, but we can't remove the karma connected with eating. So then what do? The only solution is to offer your food. Because when you offer that, when you connect that to the center, then the exploitation is cleared. The exploitation is removed. So Srila Sridhar Maharaj says very nicely, prasadam is the solution. So prasadam is like the highest solution, It's the only way, and this is why bhakti is the only way, that by and not only food, but everything that we do, by connecting that to the center, by connecting that to Krishna, then whatever exploitation was involved there, it will all be cut, Otherwise, think about it, think if you take one sandwich, how many, there's maybe 50, and then in our modern world, right, it's such a complex, we live in this very complex, sophisticated, world. So in one sandwich, you might have 50 different ingredients, right? In the bread, there might be 10 different ingredients. And then you have, maybe some mustard and cheese and some tomatoes and lettuce and whatever. And you may have 50 different ingredients, and the mustard is maybe 10 ingredients, and the bread is 10 ingredients, and maybe you have some olive oil, salt, pepper, you have some vegetables in there. Think about how many different countries all of those ingredients came from, right? These avocados, where did they come from? Maybe they came from Ecuador, right? And maybe the bread has been imported from Italy, the olive oil has been imported from Italy, and the other things have been imported from this place or that place, So how many different countries have all these ingredients come from? How many different people, maybe 100 people, were involved in the production of every ingredient on your sandwich? How many of them were underpaid? How many was there child labor involved? If you think about it, you start to lose your mind a little bit, You don't want to think about it. Or the clothes, the phones that we use, how many different ingredients are involved? How many different substances are involved to make one iPad? And how were all those workers treated? And the money that's made from this, where is that going? Is it going into the pockets of honest, hardworking people? Or is it going into the pockets of, exploitative capitalists who have way more money than they need, So then we're giving them money, right? So think about that, how much exploitation is involved in just something simple like a sandwich, or picking up your iPad. Then some amount of that is on our shoulders, right? It has to be. We are enabled, like they say in one of the buzzwords people use nowadays is enabling things, right? Maybe in psychology you use that expression. Enabling.
I don't understand the word.
Enabling. Enabling means when you're allowing something to happen. Enable, you're allowing something to happen. So maybe you have a different word you use in Hungarian. But people use it if there's a dysfunctional relationship or a dysfunctional situation, dysfunctional dynamic, and you're allowing it to happen. So they say you're enabling that. You shouldn't enable that, So in the same way, we're supporting all these things indirectly, we're allowing them to happen, we're supporting it. So some amount of that reaction has to come to us, It has to. So therefore, what is the solution? We boycott everything, or we become, what are they called? Luddites. You've heard of Luddites. They're people, they refuse to use any technology, Or you have people who become very fanatic about like, you know, like you have like fair trade, right? Different companies like that. Or I've seen one brand called Karma Free, you know, like there's lots of companies like this, you know, and we can appreciate that. But still, you cannot completely cut the amount of exploitation. It's impossible. So the only solution is bhakti. You know, the only solution is offering everything, you know. Otherwise, whatever karma you're collecting, you have to pay back to the last penny. You know, you have to pay back. You know? So the only solution is making that connection with the center, trying to live in that mood of offering, in that mood of sacrifice. It's the only way. Okay, well, we can, I'll just finish reading these translations. We read up to 15, right? But those who prepare food for their own pleasure partake only of sin. The living beings' bodies are manifest from food. Food is manifest due to rain. Rainfall ensues from the performance of sacrifice, and action is the cause of sacrifice. Action is prescribed in the Vedas, and the Vedas originate in Akshara, the imperishable. Therefore, the all-pervading, imperishable Lord is ever present within the acts of sacrifice that are offered to Him. Okay, we can maybe stop there. We don't need to go on too long. Anyone want to add anything? Oh, okay. Okay, we can stop then.